Hello, my name is Narina, and I used to think the worst pain was physical. But then I learned what it feels like when your own family watches you lying paralyzed on the kitchen floor and walks away. My brother said it was a joke. My parents told everyone I was faking. I begged them to believe me, even when I couldn't move. But what if the MRI didn't just prove I was hurt? What if it exposed everything they'd buried? What happens when the truth makes your family criminals? There's a softness to Savannah in the early morning that makes even the ugliest truths look gentle. Spanish moss hanging like faded lace, streets that smell faintly of honeysuckle, and memories people would rather rewrite. But my truth never softened, not even beneath the charm of our family's wraparound porch and Emery's perfectly trimmed hedges. I'm Narina. 30 now, at least on paper. Inside, some days I still feel 15, like I'm trapped in that endless loop of being tolerated but never seen. My family, picture perfect, if you squint. My father, Emery Rhodes, walks like the world owes him a debt he never plans to repay. He runs a small contracting business and thinks that entitles him to opinions on everything, from politics to whether my limp handshake meant I'd never marry. My mother, Vera, has the kind of smile that looks like it came with the fine china set, delicate, brittle, and rarely sincere. She calls herself a traditional Southern mother, which mostly means she loves hosting Bible study and hates being questioned. Then there's Clyde, my older brother, golden boy, charmer, the kind of man who gets away with murder and leaves thank you notes. I used to think I was the family ghost, only visible when someone needed a target or a punchline. If Clyde forgot something, Narina moved it. If the mood at dinner turned sour, Narina's being sensitive again. I used to argue. I don't anymore. There was a birthday party once. Clyde's 15th, I think. I baked a cake from scratch. I was so proud of it. Spent hours trying to make the frosting smooth. Bought food coloring with my own money to write his name on top. But when guests arrived, Vera took one look and said, "Let's just say Clyde made it. He's got such a talent for detail, don't you think?" And everyone nodded. I smiled like I'd been trained to, clapped even. Inside, something small curled up and didn't wake up for a long time. From that point forward, I stopped speaking up. That's how it works. You tell the truth too many times and nobody listens. You learn to edit yourself down to what people want to hear. She's just dramatic. She overreacts. She always wants attention. I began to believe it. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I was too much. Now, years later, I'd come back home, temporarily, I'd told myself, to save money while applying to finish my physical therapy degree. Rent in town was brutal. The room I once used to escape homework and my mother's silent disappointment had become my base camp again. I unpacked boxes next to childhood trophies I'd never won. Clyde's birthday landed on a humid Saturday in mid-August. He'd just turned 29 and was home for the weekend, driving up in his glossy new car and announcing his arrival like he was still the prince of the place. His smile was tight, calculated, the kind that widened only when he had an audience. That afternoon, I wore my bookstore uniform, navy polo, khaki slacks, because I'd worked the morning shift and hadn't bothered to change. Clyde noticed, of course. "You still working there?" he asked, lifting one eyebrow as he sipped from his cold brew. "Yeah," I said, "part-time, while I prep school apps." He looked over my outfit. "You know, that shirt really doesn't scream career woman," Vera chuckled. "Clyde, don't tease your sister." But she didn't disagree. The party setup was simple. Folding chairs on the back patio, fairy lights strung up across the oak branches. A few of Clyde's college friends had shown up, the type who laughed too loud and referred to me as little sis, even though we'd never spoken. I stayed near the kitchen, prepping chips and dips, avoiding the way Clyde kept glancing my way with that look, the one that meant he was bored and needed entertainment. I'd seen it so many times growing up. Then he called out, "Hey, Narina, come here a sec." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped over, not thinking much of it. The tiled floor near the sink had always been slick when the humidity climbed. But I didn't see anything wrong at first. Clyde smiled wider. "Help me move this cooler?" The moment I stepped closer, my foot slid, quick and sharp, like stepping onto ice. My other leg followed. The world tilted. I tried to steady myself, arms flailing, but gravity won. And in that split second, a heartbeat, I heard the burst of laughter, then pain, a sharp thud. My lower back slammed against the edge of the island cabinet. My legs twisted beneath me. Silence dropped over the room like a curtain, the way it always did when something real interrupted their performance. My ears rang. Someone whispered, "Damn, she really fell." Then Clyde laughed. "Did anyone get that on video?" I couldn't breathe right. My legs didn't move. I tried shifting. Nothing. My fingers curled around the edge of the cabinet. My throat closed. Something was wrong. Really, really wrong. Clyde crouched beside me. Drama queens at it again. "Come on, get up before Mom sees and flips." I tried to speak. My lips barely moved. I can't feel my legs," he scoffed. "Not this again." But it wasn't again. It was new. Final. The kind of realization that doesn't explode. It settles, heavy and cold. I blinked slowly, stared at the ceiling fan spinning above us. But that was the moment the old label died, and a new life, far more painful, began. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Something was wrong. Not twisted ankle wrong, not slipped and bruised my tailbone wrong. This was deeper, heavier. Like the bottom half of my body had been erased from memory, and my brain couldn't reconnect the lines. I blinked slowly. There were lights above me, fairy lights from the party strung across the patio, but they blurred together like someone had smeared Vaseline over the sky. I tried again, quietly, to move my right foot. Nothing. "I'm not playing," I whispered, but it got lost in the noise. Somewhere above me, Clyde laughed, loud and sharp, like a comic doing a set in a bar that didn't know it was a crime scene. "Y'all see that? Man, that was wild. Did someone get it on their phone?" he called out to the crowd, and someone answered, "I got it," with a chuckle that stung worse than the fall. I looked up at Clyde's face, hovering above me, eyebrows raised, grin still plastered on like he was proud of himself. He didn't see me, not really. He saw the version of me they'd all agreed on long ago, the overreactor, the exaggerator, the family joke. "I can't move," I whispered again, louder this time. Still, no one moved. He bent down, nudged my foot with his sneaker like I was a rug that needed straightening. "Come on, Narina. Don't be dramatic," he said, voice soft enough that only I could hear it. I stared at him. "I'm not," I said, barely able to push the words past the panic in my throat. And then, through the blur of voices and clinking glasses, I heard my father's tone rise. "What is going on here?" Emery barked as he came toward me, his button-down shirt still neatly tucked in, eyes darting from the crowd to the ground where I lay. "She slipped," Clyde said with a shrug, not even looking at me anymore. "I told her to be careful with those damn shoes on that tile," Vera added, appearing just behind him with her ever-present glass of Cabernet. "She's fine, she does this," Emery muttered, waving a hand dismissively. "Get up, Narina. You're embarrassing us in front of people." I tried to raise my voice, but it cracked. "Dad, I can't move my legs." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Don't start this. Not today." Vera leaned forward, her expression tight. "Narina, please, don't do this to your brother. It's his birthday." "I'm not doing anything." My voice finally cut through the space between us. "I can't feel my legs. Something is wrong." For a moment, there was stillness. Then Emery let out a heavy sigh and turned away. Vera shook her head slowly, her disappointment louder than any scream. Clyde had already walked back toward the grill, cracking a joke with someone near the beer cooler. They left me there, flat on my back, in pain, terrified, alone. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, not just from the injury, but from the humiliation. The realization that I could be paralyzed and they'd still be more concerned with the optics than my body. I could die, and they'd wonder why I couldn't just keep it together until dessert. I saw someone across the patio, one of Clyde's friends, I think, hesitate, phone still in hand. His eyes met mine briefly, uncertain. Then he looked away and slipped into the crowd. Time crawled. The party didn't stop exactly. It just adjusted. People moved around me like I was a broken chair someone hadn't gotten around to removing. They laughed a little quieter, glanced in my direction like checking on a stranger who might be faking. No one touched me. No one helped. The tile beneath me began to feel colder, even in the heat of the Georgia evening. I thought of every time I'd been called sensitive, every moment I'd doubted my own feelings because no one validated them. Was this what they needed? A spine injury to take me seriously? I closed my eyes, just for a second. The pain didn't change, but the weight of their silence made it worse. Then I heard footsteps, faster, deliberate. Narina? The voice was soft, but firm. It didn't belong to Vera, or Clyde, or any of the guests. It was Lenora Whitlock, our neighbor, former nurse. Kind, quiet, always kept to herself unless something truly mattered. She knelt beside me, her breath a little shaky. I saw you fall. Don't move, okay? I opened my eyes again. She looked down at me, her brow furrowed. Can you feel this? She asked, pressing her fingers lightly against my shin. I tried. Nothing. She moved to the other leg. Same question. I shook my head. No. I can't. Lenora stood up quickly and turned to the group. Has anyone called 911? No one answered. I'm calling now, she said, pulling her phone from her bag. Vera moved toward her, alarmed. Lenora, that's not necessary. She's just… Vera, no, Lenora snapped, louder than I'd ever heard her speak. Your daughter may have a spinal injury. If we move her, we could make it worse. She needs help, now. Vera blinked, as if unsure what to do without a script. Lenora didn't wait. She stepped aside, pressed the phone to her ear, and gave our address. I exhaled. For the first time since the fall, I felt seen. Lenora's voice cut through the haze like a flashlight in fog. Sharp, direct, a sound that demanded action. She was still on the phone when the sirens began to echo down the street. Within minutes, less than it takes to serve a slice of cake, 2 EMTs had stepped through the side gate, guided by Lenora's waving hand. They moved quickly, kneeling beside me, asking questions I couldn't answer fast enough. Can you feel this? One asked, touching my ankle. I shook my head. No, nothing. Were you pushed? The other asked, his tone neutral but purposeful. No, I said automatically, then paused. Was I? Clyde had called me over. I'd slipped, but the look on his face, right before it happened, that grin. I blinked. I don't know. The floor was wet. Behind them, Emery's voice rose again. This is absurd. It was an accident. You all are blowing this way out of proportion. No one's accusing anyone yet, sir, one EMT replied. But we have to be careful with spinal cases. Vera stepped forward, wine glass still in hand. She's always been theatrical. She used to fake stomach aches to get out of gym class. Lenora turned. She's paralyzed. That shut them both up, briefly. As they secured me onto the backboard, the stiffness of the straps across my chest was oddly comforting. For the first time in what felt like hours, someone was treating me like I mattered. I couldn't move, but at least I wasn't invisible. Inside the ambulance, I stared at the ceiling again. The same position, different context, bright white lights, no fairy string bulbs, just reality. The paramedic beside me asked gently, Any allergies? Medications? Prior injuries? No allergies, I murmured. I've had back pain before, a few falls, but no one ever took them seriously. She scribbled something down. You'll be at Memorial in under 10. They'll do a scan. We'll figure it out. Figure it out. I wondered how many years it would take to unravel everything. The hospital lobby was cold. I remember the smell of antiseptic, the beep of monitors, the shuffle of rubber soles. They wheeled me straight into triage, then imaging. I signed paperwork with a trembling hand while a nurse guided my fingers. Clyde and my parents didn't come with me. I don't know if they followed the ambulance or just went back to cake and conversation. Lying alone in the radiology room, I stared up at another ceiling. The technician told me to stay very still. I did. While the machine clicked and hummed around me, I thought about the journal I used to keep in high school. It had a soft fabric cover, lavender-colored, with little pressed flowers on the front. I used to write in it every night, every time Clyde tripped me or Mom accused me of making things up. Every ache, every bruise, every time I swallowed my own voice and replaced it with silence. When I moved out for college, I packed it in a box. A year later, when I came home for Thanksgiving, it was gone. "Mom," I asked, standing in the garage beside the shelves where I'd left it, "do you know where my lavender journal went?" She didn't look up from the grocery bags she was unloading. "That old thing, I tossed it. It was full of nonsense." She didn't say it cruelly. She said it like it was obvious, like of course she had the right to erase my words. Now, years later, in a hospital gown under bright lights, I realized that journal might have been the only place I had ever told the truth. The MRI ended. They wheeled me back out. Time passed, blurry and uneven. Eventually, a doctor came in. He introduced himself, shook my hand, and sat beside me. "Narina," he said gently, "I want to be honest with you." I braced myself. "You have a compression fracture at L2. That's likely what's causing the paralysis. But there's more." I frowned. "More?" He opened the scan images on a screen beside the bed. "These spots here, T7, T11, L4, they show signs of older injuries, not from today. Some look like they've been healing for months. Others, possibly years." I stared at the screen, at the white and gray lines that apparently held my entire life in them. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You're saying this isn't the first time?" He nodded. "It looks like you've had repeated spinal trauma over a period of time. Have you ever been evaluated for that before?" I shook my head. "No one ever believed me." He didn't respond with pity. He just nodded and said, "We'll run more tests, but we need to get an orthopedic consult and a neurologist involved." As he stood to leave, he paused. "You're not alone now, okay? We'll do what we can." That sentence lingered longer than any diagnosis. Later that night, as I lay in the hospital room, lights dimmed, machines clicking beside me, a nurse named Elise sat with me for a while. She was kind in a way that didn't feel forced. "Do you have someone you want to call?" she asked. I hesitated. Then, "My family doesn't think this is real." She raised her eyebrows. "And what do you think?" "I think it's been real for a long time. I just didn't know how to name it." She nodded. "Sometimes it takes a moment like this to make the fog lift." I wanted to sleep, but the images on the screen wouldn't leave me. The lines of my spine, the evidence no one could dismiss. Not even Vera's charm or Emery's threats could talk away medical proof. For years, I'd been told I was clumsy, that I bruised too easily, that I tripped over nothing, that Clyde was just roughhousing. But now I had black and white images that said otherwise. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. There was grief, there was anger, and beneath it, the beginning of something else. Resolve. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Between the fluorescent hallway lights spilling through the curtain and the quiet beeping from the monitor above my bed, it felt like time slowed down just to make me sit with everything. Every click of the IV pump, every shadow moving across the ceiling. And all I could think about was the scan, that glowing image of my spine, silent proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. Dr. Patterson had said it so calmly earlier. "You've suffered a severe compression fracture at L2. That was the present injury. That one had a clear cause, a timestamp. Clyde's birthday, a wet floor, a laugh. But then came the real shock. Your T7, T11, and L4 also show signs of old trauma, not from today." I remembered the way the room tilted after he said that, like the walls were shifting without permission. I don't think I said anything. I just nodded, then stared at the screen. The dots and lines that had lived inside me for years, ignored, like tiny, silent witnesses no one thought to ask. Earlier that morning, before the sun rose, I finally closed my eyes for a few minutes. I wasn't sure I had actually slept until I heard the soft knock on the door and saw a woman walk in with a clipboard and gentle eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Williams, a neurosurgeon. "I've reviewed your MRI with Dr. Patterson," she said as she pulled a chair close to my bed. "I want to walk you through everything so nothing's left unsaid." Her tone was kind, direct. She wasn't there to guess or speculate. She was there to inform. She brought up the same scan again. I already knew what was on it, but something about seeing it twice in one day, hearing it from two different experts, made it all feel like it was settling into place, like this wasn't just medical, it was narrative. "These older compression fractures," she said, pointing at the screen, "likely happened at different points in time. We can't say exactly when, but based on the healing patterns, they range from several months ago to possibly a few years." I cleared my throat. What would have caused them? She looked at me carefully. "They can be caused by impact, falls, repetitive trauma." I nodded slowly. She didn't ask more. I think she knew she didn't have to. After she left, I asked the nurse for a pen and some paper. I didn't have my journal anymore. That one was long gone, but I needed to write something down. I needed to get the timeline clear. The trampoline incident, summer before high school. Clyde had tackled me mid-jump. I landed hard, flat on my back. Couldn't walk straight for a week. Vera said I was being dramatic, that I was looking for attention, because Clyde had gotten a trophy that same day. Then there was the stairwell fall. Sophomore year of college. I came home for fall break. Clyde tripped me on accident as we came back from dinner. I hit my spine against the railing. For weeks afterward, I could barely bend down without pain. I mentioned it once. Emery handed me ibuprofen and told me to toughen up. And then, the time I blacked out after hitting the back deck. Clyde had locked me out during a storm, as a joke. I slipped on the wet wood trying to climb in through the side porch. All of it came flooding back, the moments I'd tucked away as isolated events. Now they formed a pattern, and that pattern had a name: repeated trauma. Later that afternoon, Dr. Patterson returned with a social worker. "This is Allison," he said. "She's here to talk with you if you're ready." I wasn't sure what ready looked like, but I nodded. Allison sat beside me and folded her hands in her lap. "I'm here as a patient advocate, Narina. Whatever you choose to share is up to you, but I can help you navigate the next steps, medical, legal, emotional. You're not alone." I stared at her for a long moment. "My brother poured oil on the kitchen floor," I said slowly. "Then he called me over. He knew I'd walk that way." Allison didn't flinch. She just waited. "My parents," I exhaled. "They didn't believe I was really hurt. Even when I couldn't move, they said I was exaggerating." I felt the pressure build behind my eyes again. Not from sadness, from anger, from clarity. They didn't just ignore my pain. They helped cause it. The words came out harder than I expected, and once they were out, I couldn't take them back. Not that I wanted to. Allison nodded slowly. "That's something we can act on, if you choose." After she left, I stared at the paper in my handwritten timeline. Each incident marked with a season, a school year, a vague recollection of who else might have been there. I underlined one sentence. Nobody ever believed me the first time. Now I had proof, not just in my body, but on paper, digital scans, professional diagnoses. And I had Lenora, the neighbor who saw the fall and called for help. She'd been quiet for years, like me, but she chose to speak when it counted. By evening, the nurse told me I'd be transferred to a different room for long-term evaluation. They wanted to monitor spinal swelling and potential nerve damage. A transport orderly wheeled me down a quiet corridor while I held the timeline paper in my lap like a lifeline. As we turned the corner, I saw a familiar figure near the vending machine. Clyde. He was alone. No Vera. No Emery. Just him in his designer button-down, staring at the snack options like they owed him something. He turned and saw me. For a split second, his expression faltered. Then came the smirk. "You really went all in this time, huh?" he said, casually. "I mean, ambulance and everything." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You've always been a little unbalanced. Guess it finally caught up to you." That's when I realized something. He wasn't just cruel, he was terrified. Not because he thought I'd die, but because for the first time I had witnesses, documentation, power. I have the scan, I said quietly. His face changed, just a flicker, but it was there. He scoffed. Whatever. You think that's going to prove anything? I don't need to prove it to you, I said. I just have to prove it once. He didn't respond, just walked away. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I just looked down at the paper again. One sentence stood out. You're not crazy, you're hurt. And finally, I believed it. The lights in my hospital room shifted from stark white to a muted gold as the day wore on, filtering through the blinds with the kind of soft glow that should have made everything feel peaceful. But peace wasn't what I felt. It was more like suspension, like being caught between the truth I finally had the courage to name and the wreckage I knew would follow. A nurse I hadn't seen before came in just after lunch with a tray of bland food and a small smile. She adjusted my IV, checked the monitor, and then said, "You have a visitor. She's just outside." I blinked. My mom? The nurse looked confused for a second. No. I believe she said her name was Lenora. Lenora. I felt my chest loosen for the first time all day. Let her in, I said, sitting up as much as my back brace would allow. The door opened slowly, and there she was, Lenora Whitlock, our next-door neighbor who had watched my family's backyard barbecues from her porch and waved politely during holiday light installations. She'd always been pleasant, distant, but today she carried a thermos, a small book, and a look in her eyes that was anything but casual. "I brought tea," she said gently, placing the thermos on my side table. "Chamomile. Thought you could use something that didn't smell like disinfectant." "Thanks," I said quietly. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she closed the curtain halfway around the bed, more for psychological privacy than necessity. Then she pulled the chair close and sat down, her back straight, but her hands fidgeting with the book cover. "I've lived next to your family for 10 years, she started, voice low, like someone rehearsing an apology. And in all that time, I noticed things. Nothing I could ever prove. Just patterns, sounds. You yelling, then nothing. You limping, but laughing it off. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not yet. I saw you fall," she continued. And I knew it wasn't the first time something had gone terribly wrong. She finally looked me in the eye. "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I didn't know how. I thought maybe I was imagining it, or that it wasn't my place. But it is. It should have been." I swallowed hard. "You believe me?" "Yes," she said, "and I won't be silent again." I closed my eyes for a beat, letting the weight of her words settle inside me like something solid, something anchoring. When I opened them again, I said, "He used to lock me out, Clyde, for fun, usually when my parents weren't home. He'd laugh while I cried and banged on the door." Lenora's face didn't change, but her grip on the book tightened. Once, he shoved me into the pantry and told me to cool off, said I was being a drama queen. I was 9. I stayed there for 2 hours until Dad came home. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She just listened, fully, attentively. And when I paused, she said softly, "You don't have to justify anything. I believe you. Now let's make it official." "What do you mean?" "I know someone who can help you file a report. We'll go through the hospital's legal support staff. You've got documentation now, medical proof, and you've got me as a witness. That's more than most survivors ever get." The word survivor felt strange on my skin, like trying on a coat that wasn't mine yet, but might be someday. "I'm scared," I admitted. "If I do this, they'll never forgive me. My parents, Clyde, they'll turn on me harder than ever." Lenora leaned in. "Honey, they already did. The only reason they haven't turned away entirely is because they still think you'll come crawling back. You speaking up? That just confirms their fear that you won't." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Blank forms, pens, a checklist. She was serious. "Will you help me fill it out?" I asked. Of course. We spent the next hour going line by line. Lenora read the fine print while I answered every section slowly, measuring each word like it had weight. Because it did. When we got to the part about detailing past incidents, I felt my hands tremble. Take your time, she said. You don't have to recall every detail right now. We can add supplements later. But the memories came flooding in faster than I could organize them. The time I was pushed off the porch because I didn't laugh at his joke. The dinner table fights where I left the room crying and nobody followed. The doctor visits that never happened. I was halfway through writing about one specific summer, the trampoline accident, when a nurse knocked and peeked in. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know. Your parents said they won't be coming today. They left word with the front desk. My pen stilled. Okay, I said evenly. She nodded and left. Lenora glanced at me. You all right? I forced a small smile. Honestly, that's fine. I'm not their daughter anymore. We finished the forms. She helped me sign and date everything, then handed the packet to the nurse's station for processing. As evening crept in and the hallway lights dimmed for night shift change, I looked out the window and whispered, more to myself than anyone else. They told me I'd regret crossing them, but I had nothing left to lose. The papers were signed. My hand had barely left the pen when the realization hit. There was no turning back. I'd crossed an invisible threshold. The version of me who waited for apologies was gone. What remained was someone clearer, someone sharper, and if speaking the truth meant burning every bridge tied to the road's name, then let the flames begin. It didn't take long for word to reach them. The hospital room door flung open the next morning. I didn't need to look up to know the rhythm of those shoes, the tension in that breath. Emery entered first, stiff posture, shoulders braced like he was heading into court. Vera followed, quieter, but no less lethal. He didn't bother with a greeting. What the hell is this? He barked, flinging a packet of legal documents onto the tray table beside me. You really want to drag your family through the mud like this? Over what? A fall? I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. Silence, I'd learned, was a weapon more effective than screaming, and it drove him mad. Vera moved closer, her voice measured, rehearsed. You're upset. We understand that. But this is not the way to handle it. She motioned toward the documents, now crumpled from Emery's grip. You filed an official police report. Do you understand what that does to us? To Clyde? I met her gaze. It tells the truth. Her expression cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to show that she hadn't expected me to hold my ground. Emery leaned forward, voice low and venomous. You want to act like a stranger to this family? Fine, but don't think you can do that and still call yourself a daughter of mine. Then I guess I never was, I replied, calm, measured, and true. The words sat in the air between us like a dropped plate that no one wanted to clean up. They left soon after, no hug, no tears, just the hollow slam of the door. Lenora returned later that afternoon, carrying a manila envelope and a coffee. She didn't say anything at first, just set the cup down and opened the folder on the side table. I had one of my contacts look over a few documents, she said, mostly financials, property records. I sat up slightly, wincing as the brace shifted against my back. This apartment, she said slowly, pulling out a copy of a deed. The one your parents said they gave you in your sophomore year? I nodded. They told me it was in my name, part of my college fund. She tapped the paper. It's not. It's in Clyde's. The room went quiet. I blinked. Are you sure? She slid the paper closer to me. Signed by Emery. Transferred directly to Clyde 2 weeks after the so-called gift was made. I stared at the lines of text, the notary seal, the printed names. They never intended it for me, I whispered. Lenora didn't respond. She didn't need to. I felt the betrayal settle into a familiar spot, right beneath my ribs, not as a wound anymore, but as something calcified, a piece of evidence I could carry. Even the places I thought were mine, I said, weren't. We sat in silence a while. Nurses came and went. The sky outside changed from pale gray to a deeper blue, the kind of shift that makes you realize how long you've been sitting still. Eventually, a paralegal named Marissa, young, sharp, hair pulled into a perfect bun, arrived with more papers. "Ready to finalize the filing?" she asked, offering a clipboard. I nodded. Yes. It took another 30 minutes to read through the affidavits, the witness statements, the medical notations. I initialed page after page, signing off on the truth like it was a contract with the life I hadn't been allowed to live. When I was done, I pushed the clipboard back to her. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. She smiled. "You're doing something brave." "No," I replied. "I'm doing something necessary." After she left, I looked at Lenora. "You still think I'm strong?" She tilted her head. "I think you're tired, and tired people do remarkable things when no one else steps in." That night, I lay awake thinking about the word plaintiff. It wasn't a word I'd ever imagined attached to me. It sounded formal, distant, but it fit. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was someone filing charges against the people who raised me. Later, around 9, a nurse knocked gently and entered with a tray of evening meds. Her name tag said Janice. "Looks like your parents aren't on the approved visitor list anymore," she said casually, while checking the IV line. "That's right," I said. She nodded like she understood more than she let on. "Well," she added, handing me a cup of water, "some people think blood makes you family. Truth is, sometimes it just makes you bleed longer." I smiled for the first time all day. As she left, I looked out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance like tiny warnings, or maybe promises. "I'm not here for revenge," I whispered to no one. "I'm here for truth. And if it burns everything down, so be it." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a nurse adjusting my IV drip and the steady beep of the monitor beside my bed. The room smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee from the hallway. I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. My mind kept circling around the signatures on the affidavit, the look on Emery's face when I said, "I guess I never was your daughter," and the echo of my own words. If it burns everything down, so be it. It had already begun to burn. By mid-morning, I got word from the hospital's legal liaison that Clyde had been formally contacted by investigators. They'd asked for an in-person interview. According to the file, he showed up looking calm, groomed, even smiled at the receptionist like he was checking into a hotel. When they questioned him, he leaned back in the chair and gave them exactly what you'd expect from someone who thought charm was currency. "It was a joke," he told them. "I didn't mean for her to fall. We play like that all the time. You can ask anyone." His tone was smooth, like syrup over broken glass. "It was a party. She slipped." They asked about the floor. "Was there oil?" "Yeah," he admitted. "I spilled some earlier. I cleaned it. Maybe not all of it." "But come on, that's not a crime." It sounded reasonable. Practiced. He'd rehearsed it in front of the mirror, maybe even said it out loud to Vera the night before. But it fell apart within the hour. Lenora, true to her word, had submitted footage from her door camera. Positioned diagonally across the yard, it had a perfect line of sight into the kitchen through the French doors. The officers pulled the file, fast-forwarded, paused, rewound. And there he was, Clyde, walking into frame with a half-empty bottle of cooking oil in his hand. He looked around, glanced at the door, then tipped the bottle at a precise spot on the tile, a small circle. Then he called out, "Narina, can you give me a hand in here?" They zoomed in on his face, smiling. They had it all: the timing, the invitation, the intent. It wasn't a prank, it was a setup. When the officers showed him the footage, the cracks began to show, the tight jaw, the widening eyes. "This is all being blown out of proportion," he said, voice higher than before. "You can't really think I meant to hurt her." But something inside him broke. You could see it. That realization that charm couldn't undo digital evidence. Later that evening, when the hospital had settled into its usual rhythm, shift change, cafeteria trays, the low hum of televisions in patient rooms, I got a call. It was from Lenora. "He came to my property," she said, voice low and calm. "Tried to open the side garage." My pulse jumped. What? Just now, around 7, I was watching TV and saw the motion alert. He was messing with the breaker panel near the back. Did he take anything? No. I have a secondary system, a hidden one. She paused. It caught everything. Within the hour, Clyde was arrested again, this time for tampering with evidence and trespassing. I was notified the next morning by the hospital liaison. The nurse who brought in my breakfast tray, eggs, dry toast, orange juice, mentioned it like it was weather. Sounds like they picked up your brother again, she said, carefully adjusting my blanket. Guess he didn't think security cameras were a thing. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I didn't react. He finally crossed a line that even his charm couldn't fix, I said. The news broke before lunch. Local networks ran it first, then regional ones picked it up. Family scandal. Paralyzed daughter's evidence triggers arrest. My name wasn't on the banner, but it didn't have to be. Anyone from Savannah who watched the clip would recognize the Rhodes house, the back porch, the patio where I fell. My phone, locked away in the top drawer of my nightstand, buzzed for over an hour. Texts, voicemails, emails, some from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, some from complete strangers who had seen the footage online. She was always the quiet one. I thought they were such a close family. I always knew something was off with him. But the message that struck hardest came from someone anonymous. No name, no profile photo, just words. You saved me from thinking I was the only one. I stared at that message for a long time. By nightfall, reporters were parked outside the hospital. The nurses did their best to keep them away, but every now and then I saw someone in a polo shirt with a microphone loitering near the main entrance. I sat in my bed, the blinds half closed, watching my own story unfold on a muted TV screen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. It was still dark when I woke that morning. The city hadn't begun to stir yet, but I had. My body no longer jerked from pain in my sleep, but I still carried the weight of anticipation, of what it meant to sit across from people who had made a career out of pretending. Lenora picked me up from the hospital rehabilitation unit promptly at 7. The court appearance was set for 9, but I needed the full 2 hours, between traffic, prep, and steadying my nerves. I dressed in silence that morning. Black blazer, slate gray slacks, nothing flashy, just clean lines and firm resolve. Lenora had pressed everything herself the night before and left a note. This isn't about winning, it's about being heard. The courthouse was busier than I expected. Cameras stood behind ropes, quiet for now, waiting like predators for movement. Inside, it smelled like old wood and new tension. My wheelchair glided across the tile floor, the rubber wheels murmuring like an old song. Every creak in the building felt loud. And then I saw them. Clyde sat at the defense table, his posture straighter than usual. He didn't look at me, didn't even glance. He was dressed too well for someone on trial. Navy suit, crisp shirt, a tie that probably cost more than the entire hospital lunch budget. Vera sat 2 rows behind him, gripping Emery's hand like they were waiting to see if their house would be condemned. They didn't nod. They didn't speak. But I saw Vera's lips move. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just panic. The trial began with evidence. Dr. Patterson walked the jury through the MRI slides. Every vertebra, every past fracture. A timeline of neglect drawn in spinal damage. He spoke like a surgeon, clear, unapologetic. There is no medical explanation for this number of untreated spinal injuries unless consistent trauma is involved. Then came Lenora. She sat upright in the witness box, palms open. She didn't dress to impress, just a soft blue blouse and honesty. I watched her fall, she said. I saw him pour the oil. I didn't say anything for a long time. I thought I didn't have a right to. But silence has a cost. She paused before finishing. I'm here now to pay part of that debt. A written statement followed. From my 10th grade history teacher, Ms. Bradley. She'd seen bruises. She hadn't said anything either. And then someone I never expected stepped forward. Mary. She used to clean our house twice a week when I was a teenager. I hadn't seen her since I was 16. But there she was, hair gray now, hands folded neatly in her lap. I remember once seeing Miss Narina limping, Mary said. Asked her what happened. She said she slipped on the deck. But I saw Mr. Clyde push her. No one said anything. They laughed, but I never forgot. I don't remember breathing during that part. I just watched my history unfold out loud, validated, affirmed. When the verdict came, I didn't smile. Clyde was found guilty of aggravated assault and obstruction of justice. Emery and Vera, willful neglect, endangerment. No one clapped, no one gasped. It was too heavy for that. Just a gavel, a declaration, and the quiet crumble of an empire built on appearances. 3 years passed, fast and slow at the same time. I learned to walk again. Not perfectly, but enough. My cane became part of me, not a crutch, but a reminder that healing takes time. I started speaking, first in small local groups, then bigger ones. I talked about injury, silence, families who hurt you more by what they ignore than what they say. I worked at a trauma recovery center. I filed grants. I helped others file reports. I built a life from the ashes of my own. Then, one spring afternoon, I found myself walking into the university's auditorium. I was giving a lecture to future therapists on how to spot signs that patients don't always say out loud. A producer from PBS had reached out a month earlier. They were filming a special on overlooked abuse cases, and mine was going to be one of the features. The room was full. I was early. I reviewed my notes backstage, took a few deep breaths, and then felt a shift in the air. I turned. Vera. She stood there in the back of the room, eyes glassy, a manila envelope clutched to her chest. Emery wasn't with her. After my talk ended and most people had cleared out, she approached slowly. She looked older, smaller. "Narina," she whispered, like saying my name required permission. I didn't respond. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed to say I was wrong." There it was. Not an excuse, not a diversion, just the truth. Late, but real. And I took a breath, let it out, looked her in the eye. "I forgive you," I said. Her lip quivered. "But," I added, "you don't get a seat in my life anymore." The pain on her face wasn't something I enjoyed, but it was necessary. Some doors don't close with a slam. They just stop opening. As she walked away, I stood still, heart steady. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing who still gets access to your peace. The city was quiet by the time I got home. The sun had long set, and the streetlights painted soft amber shapes against the pavement. I'd just finished a speaking event at the university, a panel discussion on trauma-informed care. A small but engaged crowd, a mix of students, nurses, and a few community organizers. They asked thoughtful questions. They didn't look away when I spoke. I wheeled into the building lobby slowly. My legs could manage short distances now, but tonight had taken more out of me than I expected. Once I reached my apartment, I propped my cane against the wall, unbuttoned my blazer, and leaned over the kitchen sink to splash cool water on my face. That kind of exhaustion doesn't come from talking. It comes from remembering, again and again, what it cost to get here. I changed into an old t-shirt and sweatpants, made a cup of peppermint tea, and sat cross-legged on the living room floor. There was a box in the back of my closet I hadn't touched in years, and something told me tonight was the night. The lid came off with a soft groan. Inside were pieces of a girl I hadn't let myself miss. A music CD from sophomore year, my old school ID, and beneath them, pressed flat and slightly wrinkled, my floral journal. The one I thought Vera had thrown away. It still smelled faintly like dryer sheets and ink. I turned the pages slowly. Some were blank. Some were filled with slanted, anxious handwriting. And then I found the envelope. It was addressed in neat cursive, "Grandma, please read." There was no stamp. I'd never sent it. The date on the top corner was June 18th, 15 years ago. I unfolded it and began to read aloud, not because I needed to hear it, but because that 15-year-old girl needed to know someone finally would. "Dear Grandma, sometimes I think I'm broken because no one hears me. Not really. Not in the way you used to. They think I'm just being emotional again, that I trip on purpose, that I cry to get out of chores. But Clyde slammed my arm in the car door last week and called it a joke. And when I told Mom, she said I probably startled him. I don't think they hate me. I just think they don't care to understand me. It's like I speak a language they decided isn't worth translating. I paused. My throat tightened. There were tear marks on the bottom of the letter. Faint, but there. Reading the rest felt like opening an old wound, but I kept going. I miss the way you used to brush my hair and tell me my feelings weren't wrong. I wish you were still here. You would have believed me. Love, Narina. By the end, I was crying, but it wasn't grief. It wasn't pain. It was release. That girl in the letter? She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel ashamed of her sadness. I carefully refolded the paper and slid it back into the journal. My phone buzzed from the side table. I wiped my cheeks and reached for it. One new message. Subject. I should have spoken up. It was from Ms. Bradley, my 10th grade history teacher. She had testified via statement during the trial. I hadn't spoken to her since. Her message was short. Narina, I saw the signs. I suspected. But I stayed quiet because I didn't know how to speak without making things worse. I'm sorry. You weren't invisible. I just wasn't brave enough. I see you now. SB. I held the phone for a moment, then turned off the screen and set it down. I didn't need to reply. The words had landed exactly where they needed to. Later, as the clock edged past midnight, I stood by the window, cane in hand. The city lights blinked softly in the distance. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. Some wounds never disappear, but they stop bleeding. They scab over. They remind you who you were and who you chose to become. A few weeks later, I returned to the university. This time, not as a panelist, but as the keynote speaker. A banner hung outside the auditorium. Guest lecture, recognizing silent abuse. As I walked down the hallway, a few students nodded at me, some smiling in recognition. One even whispered, "That's her." I entered the lecture room, set my notes down on the podium, and scanned the seats. There, in the third row, sat Lenora. Her hair pulled back, wearing a modest navy blouse. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. Her smile was steady, warm, proud. I cleared my throat and looked out at the crowd. I used to beg to be heard, I began. Now I use my voice so no one else has to. Some wounds may never fully disappear, but the truth has a way of cutting through silence when nothing else can. Narina's story reminds us that being believed can be the beginning of healing, and that sometimes justice starts not with anger, but with courage. Have you ever been told your pain wasn't real, that you were too sensitive? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your voice. And if stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that deserve to be heard.